In Doctor Sleep, the road often serves as a metaphor for life's journey. Characters like Dan and Rose are lost, both literally and metaphorically. They're searching for something, perhaps a sense of belonging or purpose, or maybe trying to outrun a past that won't stay buried. The road becomes a symbol of this journey, just as the endless highway in Doctor Sleep stretches on with its twists and turns. Life can feel long and winding. We, too, are often searching for our paths, trying to navigate the unexpected turns and detours that fate throws our way. The road in Doctor Sleep is also a source of unease and danger. When Dan and Rose stumble upon the true knot, they discover a sinister side of humanity, a community that preys on others for their own survival. This mirrors the darker aspects of human nature that lurk beneath the surface of society. The road becomes a pathway to the macabre, leading them to confront the depths of human evil. 404. Not found. The document you are looking for was not found on this server. Perhaps the road in Doctor Sleep is a path to self-discovery as well. Through their journey, Dan and Rose are forced to confront their pasts and come to terms with their identities. The open road becomes a space for introspection, a chance to confront inner demons and forge a new path forward. As we travel through life, we, too, encounter many roads, each offering different paths and possibilities. The road in Doctor Sleep reminds us to be cautious, to be aware of both the beauty and the danger that surrounds us on our journeys. It's a reminder that the road less traveled can lead us to places we never imagined. And so, lost in the labyrinth of the woods, Daniel decided to trust his instincts. The hum of his engine faded into the stillness, replaced by the rhythmic crunch of tires on gravel. Finally, he saw it. A clearing bathed in the glow of gaslight, the silhouette of a house against the warm radiance. Relief washed over him, a tangible thing, as real as the porch swing, gently swaying in the non-existent breeze. On the worn wood steps sat a woman, her face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. She didn't move as he climbed the steps, her presence as still and silent as a grave marker. Daniel hesitated on the threshold, debating whether to knock or ring the bell. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and he jumped, his hand instinctively reaching for the doorknob. Before he could stop himself, it turned, the door creaking open as if inviting him in. The scent of cinnamon and something else, something indescribably metallic, hit him. The woman on the steps shifted, and he saw that she wasn't alone. 2 children sat beside her, their faces turned toward the road, eyes wide and unseeing. As Daniel stood frozen, the woman rose, her face now illuminated by the light spilling from the doorway. Her smile was kind, her eyes crinkled at the corners, but there was something about them, a distant, haunted look that sent a shiver down his spine. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice as warm and inviting as the light behind her. But even as he stepped into the house, the words catching in his throat, Daniel knew he wasn't on a friendly porch anymore. He was standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable, something that smelled of ages and eons, something ancient and cold and utterly alien. The floorboards creaked beneath him, and he realized with a jolt that he wasn't making those sounds. They were coming from the house itself, from the very bones of the building, groaning in the darkness. The smell of cinnamon was cloying, sweet, and it mingled with the metallic temps that made his stomach twist. He wanted to leave, to get away from the oppressive silence and the feeling that he was being watched. But his feet seemed rooted to the spot, and he couldn't tear his gaze from the stairs leading upward, disappearing into the gloom. "Come," said the woman, her voice echoing oddly in the cavernous hall. "I've been expecting you." From Stephen King's Dr. Sleep comes the terrifying tale of Dan Torrance and Rose the Hat, now available for the first time in audio. Listen as they search for solace and sanctuary in a world where the darkness does unjust surround you. It watches you. Some shadows aren't empty. They breathe, they wait, and sometimes they reach for us when we least expect it. He tried to tell himself it was just a branch, a twig snapping under its own weight. But the sound came again and again, persistent, right outside his window. Every creak and groan of the old house settling, every sigh of the wind whispering through the trees. It was all a story in Hollow's Edge, a town where secrets festered under the skin of reality, where the past refused to stay buried. Daniel had never planned to stay long. He'd just needed a break, a detour from the highway when his car sputtered and died, leaving him stranded on the outskirts of this forgotten town. He'd intended to fix it and leave, get as far away from Hollow's Edge as quickly as possible. But now, sitting in the suffocating darkness of his room, he understood why people sometimes never left such places. It wasn't just the isolation or the gnawing sense of being watched. It was the feeling that if he left, whatever was here would follow, that the darkness he felt in his bones wasn't just his own. He got up, his muscles stiff and aching from sitting in one position too long. The window was still dark, the curtains offering no transparency to the outside world. A sudden gust of wind rattled the glass pane, and for a moment he could have sworn he saw movement beyond the window, a fleeting shadow that vanished before he could be sure. He pushed the curtains aside, the fabric making a soft, rustling sound that echoed strangely in the silent room. The moonlight filtering through the window revealed nothing but the overgrown branches of trees scraping against the glass, their gnarled shapes like clawing fingers. Outside, the wind had picked up, whipping fallen leaves into miniature tornadoes that danced across the lawn. As Daniel watched, mesmerized, he noticed a figure standing at the edge of the light, a man silhouetted against the faint glow of a street lamp. The man was tall and thin, with what looked like a suitcase by his side. He stood motionless, seemingly frozen in place. Curiosity piqued. Daniel hurried to the window. He strained to hear anything over the wind, but the man remained silent, his head slightly turned, as if listening to something just beyond Daniel's perception. A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. It wasn't the coldness of the night, but something primal, an instinct telling him to look away, to pretend he hadn't seen anything at all. But he couldn't tear his eyes away. He wanted to call out to ask who the man was and what he was doing there, but his voice caught in his throat, turning to dust on his tongue. The man was still there when Daniel went to bed, still there when he woke up in the morning, still there when he packed his bags and checked out of the motel, or what was left of it. Outside, the air was cooler, the wind less frantic. As he walked to his car, he stole another glance at the man, who was still standing in the same spot, still listening intently to the wind. Daniel shook his head, realizing he'd been staring for longer than he cared to admit. Now, he really needed to get going. With a final glance at the unsettling figure, he got into his car and started the engine. As he pulled out onto the road, he dared to look back. The man was gone. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. The moment he did, he knew he shouldn't have, because standing by the roadside, suitcase at his feet, was no one. But Daniel could have sworn he saw the faint outline of a man, the ghost of a smile on his face as he waved at Daniel's departing car. And deep in the recesses of his mind, he heard the faint echo of a voice saying, "Now you're one of us." He told himself it was nothing, just the building settling, just his imagination. But as the footsteps stopped outside his door, and the faint sound of someone breathing leaked through the cracks, Daniel knew he was not alone in room 6. The morning came, but the town didn't change. When Daniel opened the curtains, he expected sunlight, relief, some reminder of normalcy. Instead, the sky was gray, flat and unmoving, like a painting nailed above the town. No clouds shifted, no wind stirred. It was as if time itself had stopped. He walked outside, hoping for a diner, a gas station, any sign of life. The streets were empty, though he had the uncanny sense of being watched from every window. The wooden houses leaned closer, as though they wanted to listen. Finally, he found a cafe. The bell over the door chimed, a brittle sound that seemed far too loud in the stillness. Inside, a few people sat scattered at tables. They didn't speak, they didn't eat, they just looked at him. A woman behind the counter greeted him with the same too-wide smile as the motel owner. "Coffee?" she asked, though her lips hardly moved. He nodded. The cup she handed him was cracked, and when he sipped, the taste was bitter-rotten somehow. He set it down quickly, and when he looked up, every pair of eyes in the room was on him, unblinking, passing through. The woman asked. Her voice was soft, almost kind, but underneath it, something darker coiled. "Yes," Daniel managed, just passing through. She leaned forward. No one just passes through Hollow's edge. The silence that followed stretched too long, so he forced himself to leave. As he stepped outside, he noticed something. The streets were shorter. Where the road had stretched wide the night before, now it narrowed, buildings crowding in closer. The town was folding in on itself. That night, back in room 6, the true unraveling began. The mirror on the wall warped his reflection. At first, it was subtle, his eyes looking slightly off, his mouth curving too much when he wasn't smiling. But as the hours dragged on, his reflection stopped following him altogether. He'd raise his hand, and the figure in the mirror would keep it lowered, staring at him with a hunger that made his skin crawl. Sleep became impossible. Each time his eyes closed, whispers filled the room. At first, one voice, then many. They spoke in tones too soft to make out, but one phrase repeated over and over. Stay, stay, stay. He tried leaving at dawn. He packed his bag, grabbed his keys, and ran to his car. But when he drove down the only road out, he found himself circling back to the same crooked wooden sign. Hollow's Edge. No matter how far he drove, the road looped him back to the town's center. Panic set in. His heart hammered. His breath came shallow. But the town seemed to feed on it, growing heavier, darker. Windows slammed shut as he passed. Lights flickered out, one by one. Then he saw her standing by the motel, the woman from the cafe. In her hand, she held a lantern that cast an eerie glow on her face, highlighting the sharp angles, the hunger in her eyes. She took a step forward, her smile widening. "Don't go," she called out, her voice echoing strangely. "Don't go. You can't leave. You're ours now." Her words hung in the air as Daniel slammed his foot on the gas, tires screeching in protest. He had to get out, escape this suffocating stillness, outrun the darkness that seemed to be reaching for him. He careened out of Hollow's Edge, the town falling away in his rearview mirror, or so he thought, because when he glanced back, he saw the twisted figures of the townspeople gathered at the edge of town, their faces twisted in a silent scream. And in the lead, the woman with the lantern, her eyes boring into his, daring him to look away. But he couldn't look away. He was trapped between the terror of what was and the horror of what was to come, knowing in his gut that there was no escaping Hollow's Edge. Thanks for watching. If you liked this story, check out more content like this. See you next time. Okay, so we're moving right along. We are in room 6. Let's go. Oh yeah, the knocking. So that started on the second night. At first, it was just sort of like this. You know, a slow, steady tapping at the door. And when he opened it, the hallway was empty. You know, the usual, right? But then it started again, louder each time. By midnight, it shook the walls. And honestly, you can't sleep with that going on. So Daniel, bless his little cotton socks, he pressed his back to the door and whispered to himself, "It's not real. It's not real," like a mantra. And then came the voice, a child's voice right outside the door saying, "Let me in." His blood ran cold. Daniel didn't move. He didn't breathe. He didn't dare. And then the voice said it again. "Let me in." Louder, sharper. No longer a child's tone, but something distorted, guttural, as though many mouths spoke at once. And then silence. That was the scariest part. The silence after. Daniel waited, listening, his entire body frozen with terror. After a moment, he finally dared to look through the peephole. Big mistake. A face stared back, too close. Daniel's face was ashen. His hands trembled. He could feel his pulse racing in his throat. And from the mirror behind him, he heard the faint sound of laughter. Low, cruel. It echoed inside his head. "What are you doing?" Daniel whispered, stumbling back. He didn't want to see what was out there. Didn't want to know, but the face in the mirror beckoned, its laughter growing louder, urging him closer. And with shaking hands, he reached out to touch the mirror. When he did, the face in the reflection grinned, baring teeth that were far too sharp, far too long. The creature in the mirror leaned closer, its eyes boring into his. Daniel gasped. The face outside the door was gone, and when he turned away from the mirror, his door was already half opened. The doorknob rattled. The whispers returned. Stay, stay, stay. And Daniel knew then that Hollow's edge didn't just shine. It rotted, and the rot wanted him. He was being hunted, and whatever was out there was trying to get in. On the third night, Daniel barricaded the door with the chair. He sat awake, clutching the cracked mirror, convinced it might show him what was coming before it happened. And it did. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the mirror darkened. His reflection disappeared entirely, replaced by the hallway outside. And in the hallway, dozens of figures stood silent, motionless, all facing room 6. The doorknob rattled. The whispers returned. Stay, stay, stay. This time, Daniel didn't scream. Instead, he slammed the mirror face down, burying his head under the desk, hugging the key to room 6 like it was a life raft. The silence was unbearable, pressing against his ears until even his own breath sounded too loud. When he finally gathered his courage and peeked around the corner of the desk, the hallway looked empty. But Daniel knew better. He had seen them in the mirror. Slowly, carefully, he got up, still clutching the key. His legs trembled as he approached the door. As he stepped out into the hallway, the door creaked shut behind him, sealing his fate. The key slipped from his numb fingers and clattered to the floor. He didn't notice. He couldn't have cared less. Because at that moment, standing in the eerie silence of Hollow's Edge, surrounded by unseen eyes, Daniel knew he wasn't just in danger. He was trapped, and whatever was out there had him right where it wanted him. Oh, snap. See, this is why I love writing horror, because you can never truly escape the things that haunt you. Even when you think you have, they're still there waiting. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and join us next time for more spine-chilling tales from the darkest corners of our imagination. Until then, sleep tight, because some doors are better left unopened. Then the whisper came again. Stay. Only this time, it wasn't outside the door. It was right behind him. Daniel spun around. The mirror was upright again. He hadn't touched it, yet there it stood, reflecting a room that wasn't his own. In the reflection, room 6 looked clean, bright, untouched by rot. But sitting on the bed was a figure, pale, motionless, smiling, and it was him. His double stared back, lips curling into that same too-wide grin he had seen on the townspeople. Stay, the reflection whispered. Daniel stumbled backward, hitting the wall. His double rose from the bed inside the mirror, moving closer until its hands pressed against the glass. The surface rippled like water, and a cold draft swept through the room. The smell returned that metallic temps of blood mixed with damp earth. Shadows bled from the corners of the room, stretching toward him like fingers. Daniel bolted for the hallway, but it was worse. There, the figures he had glimpsed were no longer still. They lined the walls, their bodies stiff, their faces blank except for those endless black eyes. As he passed, their heads turned in unison, following him without sound. He ran. Every hallway twisted into another, looping endlessly. Doors slammed shut on their own, cutting off escape routes. The town wasn't just alive, it was a maze, reshaping itself to keep him inside. Finally, he burst through a door and found himself outside again. But the town square was filled with them. Now hundreds of townsfolk, all standing in silence, faces pale and hollow. Their lips moved together, whispering the word that had haunted him since he arrived. Stay. He screamed at them, demanded answers, begged for release. That's when one of them stepped forward, the woman from the cafe. Her smile never faltered as she spoke. We don't keep you here. You chose to come. Hollow's edge only appears to those who already belong to it. Daniel shook his head. No, I don't belong here. I'm just passing through. Her eyes darkened, a pit of nothingness. No one just passes through. The crowd began to chant now, louder, the word pounding in his skull. Stay, stay, stay. The sound vibrated the ground, rattling his bones. He ran again, desperate, until he reached his car. To his relief, it was still there. He flung himself inside, jammed the key into the ignition, and the engine roared to life. Tires screeched as he tore down the road, away from the square, away from the whispers. But deep down, he already knew. When the trees broke and the crooked wooden sign came into view, his heart sank. Hollow's edge, the loop was unbreakable. That night, broken and exhausted, Daniel returned to room 6. There was no point fighting anymore. The mirror was waiting for him, gleaming in the dark. His reflection was already sitting on the bed, smiling patiently. Once you let go, it whispered, it's easier. We've all done it. The door opened without a sound. The townspeople filed in, surrounding him in silence. Their eyes locked on him, unblinking, expectant. And Daniel understood. Hollow's Edge wasn't a town. It was a trap. A graveyard for souls who strayed too far from the world, drawn in by their own loneliness, their own weakness. Once caught, you didn't leave. You simply stayed. The mirror rippled once more. His reflection stepped out, cold hands gripping his shoulders. Daniel tried to scream, but no sound came. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him was his double slipping back into the mirror, wearing his face, his body, his life. When morning came, room 6 looked clean again. The bed was made. The air smelled faintly of dust. And Daniel, at least, the version now wearing his skin, walked out of the motel with a wide smile. A car passed through Hollow's Edge that afternoon. The driver didn't stop, didn't notice the figure standing by the road, watching with hollow eyes. But someday, someone else will. And when they do, Hollow's Edge will be waiting, just like it always has. Because the truth is simple. Towns like this don't die, they feed. And once you've entered, you'll never leave. You'll stay forever.